everyone. Welcome to episode 22 of Beers in the Lot. On this episode, we're making our picks for the NHL division winners and our cup final picks. We're providing a very quick follow-up on the Isles contract situation and the new Mathew Barzal contract and how it fits into that. And we're also discussing men's and women's hockey on the lakes, the N double at Lake Placid and the National League on the South Shore of Lake Tahoe. Welcome to episode 22.
The suspense is killing me, Daniel. You told us earlier you got a great beer to tell us about tonight. I want to hear what it is.
So we're all Kendrick fans here, right?
Absolutely.
So my beer tonight is Bats Don't Kill My Vibe by the Barrel Brothers Brewing Company.
Yeah, there you go.
Look at that.
That's awesome.
Oh my God.
Looks like the album cover.
Oh, that's awesome.
I saw it and I had to order it. So what were you pouring over there, Riggs?
So I went to the store today because I was running dangerously low in the beer fridge. So I got Sweetwater does this Dank Tank series. And it says, a series of rarely released randomness from the hombres of headiness. It's a triple IPA and it is called F2020.
F2020. EFS.
Has two middle fingers up with tattooed on the fingers EFF 2020. It's awesome.
Nice.
What do you have, Air Dog?
I went pretty simple tonight. I've got a Stella Solstice Lager. Good. It's really light. I like it.
Yeah.
Tasty.
Yeah. You need one of these. I have two of the Stella chalices. You need a couple of those.
I need a chalice.
Yeah.
Need a chalice.
Yeah.
What are you drinking tonight, John?
I have a repeat, a Red Shedman coconut porter, because I have a few left in the fridge, and I do like this porter. It's delightful. So, good hearty winter porter.
Right on.
We got one more night, one more sleep until hockey.
Yes. Hockey's back tomorrow.
And the nice thing is we almost get not a straight bubble schedule, but we kind of do. We get the 5:30 puck drop, Pens Flyers, the early game. Should be nice. So right when you finish your workday, you can start watching hockey.
Yeah, there's like 6 games on tomorrow?
Yep.
3 on the national NBC broadcast, and then I think there's a couple Montreal, Toronto at 7 that, if you have the NHL TV, it's probably on there. I think Vancouver plays sometime late tomorrow night, and
which I'll be watching.
And Colorado plays late tomorrow night, right? So
yeah, I wish that Colorado game was earlier.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Emily Kaplan tweeted out earlier today, tomorrow, and then it's 116 straight days of NHL action.
Yes.
So
Nice.
considering we've been robbed of our start of our normal cycle, we can get a bunch of straight games. So that's always nice. So with 116 straight days of NHL hockey, which is long overdue, and I can fully say that everyone on this podcast and tons of people out there agree, it'll be really interesting to see what happens with the 4 NHL divisions and how they're doing the playoffs this year, because only the top 4 seeds or teams in each division are going to make it. Canada obviously will have 4 teams in the playoff race because of that. And then you have the North is the Canadian division, obviously. Then they're doing an East, a Central, and a West. So with that being said, who do you guys like for cup favorites? Or even playoff favorites to start? We can start playoffs, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I want the Penguins to make the playoffs. This could be the year they don't, honestly. This really could be. Just because it's going to be so competitive, and the Pens are always kind of on the edge, it seems like. If they don't get going fast, like John said before, if they don't get started up and rolling quick, they'll find themselves in points trouble really fast, and they may not make it. So I want the Pens to make it. I want the Pens to win the cup. But I'm not sure. I think that East Division, we've said it before, it's Thunderdome over there. There's some badass teams in that division, and there's going to be a good team that's on the outside looking in, guaranteed. So, East Division, I think Caps are in. I think Bruins are in. I think Flyers are in. I think the Penguins are fighting for that number 4 spot. That's the way I see that particular division anyway.
Okay.
I think that the Lightning are obviously a good pick for the Central Division. Beyond that, it's kind of up in the air with some of those teams. The Stars are probably going to make that no problem. A few of those teams are kind of struggling, so they're not going to do too well. Over in the West, you've got some perennial favorites over there. The Knights are looking great, of course, so they're probably going to be an Avalanche or a Wagon, as has been said before. So they're probably going to jump in there too. Who comes out of all these though? I mean, it's gonna be a brawl, like it always is, and like it always should be too. Canadian division, Leafs. I mean, they're a sure bet. Canucks, Flames. They're all looking. Oilers. They're all looking good. So it's gonna be fantastic to see all this play out.
Daniel, what about you? Where are your picks gonna lie, give or take?
So the North Division, I like Toronto coming out of that on top.
I think everybody does.
Yeah, I mean, they just have a good energy about them, and they're a young team. It seems like they're excited to play, and I think that's who comes out of the North. East, I want to pick Pittsburgh, but I always don't pick them just because I don't want to jinx them. So I got Boston. I think they got quicker getting rid of Chara. Well, definitely younger if you look at the averages of age, right? That dropped. But I think they got quicker, and I think they're just going to be a little bit better this year than they were last. Central, I got Tampa coming out of that. Obviously, I mean they didn't lose much in the off season. I think they had a great team there. And West, I hope for Colorado. I know there's a few good teams coming out of the West Division, but I think Colorado is going to make it. And my pick for the Cup, what I want to see is Toronto and Colorado. I think that would be a great Cup.
That would be sick.
Riggs, what about you? Who are your kind of Cup picks at the moment, or division picks?
So I think we're all on Toronto, right?
Yes.
Out of the North.
I think that's a foregone conclusion.
But I would want to mention that I think they're going to have a tough time with Calgary. I think the Flames, towards the end of last season, and then going into return to play, and now this season, like they're on that upward trajectory, and they're probably like that next team as long as they're young guys. Like Kachuk leads the way, right? And they keep moving in the right direction as an organization. I do like the Flames a lot, but it's clearly like this is a pivotal year for Toronto. I like what Danny said. They have a lot of positive energy. Like we were talking about earlier today about how they play music during their practices and stuff. And I think that's awesome. Like they kind of let the guys have fun while they're doing their work. And I think that's cool, especially like for the modern player. I think that Canadian division, like everybody's going to look at the Toronto Edmonton matchup like through the regular season because it's McDavid and Matthews, and that's going to sell people's attention. But it's really Toronto's division. Out of the West, Colorado all the way. It's not even close. Yeah, the Knights are still good. I think the Blues bounce back. I think the Coyotes make a playoff appearance because I think they're on the start of that upward trajectory for their organization, even though the market out there sucks. But they don't have fans anyway, so it doesn't matter. Ducks and Kings, though, even though I don't think they're going to do anything, they have a lot of really talented young players, a lot of the players that we were following in the World Juniors that I think will be interesting to watch. How does Zegras adjust to the pro game? How does Kaliev adjust to the pro game? And that kind of stuff. In the Central, I think you're going to see a rematch of Dallas and Tampa, and I think Dallas actually edges them out this time. And that's really all I have to say about that. Both of those teams are basically the same, personnel-wise. The East is Thunderdome. It is the battle royale of the shortened COVID NHL season. But the class of the Eastern Conference is still the class of the Eastern Conference. It's still Philly, Washington, Boston, and Pittsburgh. I think that Washington and Pittsburgh, it's kind of like their last hurrah in their respective windows of contention. I think maybe Washington gets out of that division, but that's pretty much all they're going to be able to do. I think that, like Danny said, I think we're in for a Toronto, Colorado Stanley Cup, and I think Big Mac, Thick Boy Hockey,
Oh yes.
raises that cup.
So you're
that's my
calling cup winner.
Yeah, I'm going.
Ooh.
I'll go all the way with
all
Thick
in,
Man.
huh?
Harry called a shot.
Hey, shoot or shoot.
Shoot or shoot. That's right. I believe it. So I agree everything with the East, and I think that's kind of everyone's really saying it. Those four teams, Boston, Philly, Pittsburgh, Washington, they're overall the best composed teams in general. I don't see much from the Devils. Rangers, I still think they're a hair off. I like a lot of their pieces, but I don't think they're there yet. The Islanders, we'll get into that later. We don't have to touch on it now. We have our own opinion. Sabres, I want to see them do well, but I just don't see it because there's still too many pieces off on the defensive side and the goaltending side. I do think they're going to put up a ton of goals this year with Taylor Hall, maybe Jeff Skinner from the fourth line making $1 billion this year. Hole chip in some goals. Jack, but I think Taylor Hall and Jack Eichel at this point, we should just mark them down for a 56 game season, 60 plus points at least, because they're going to hit those numbers. The only thing about the East Division, Washington, Boston, and Pittsburgh, as much as we love those teams, Boston not so much, but obviously Pittsburgh and Washington, unlike Philly, they're all old. So Philly has a very young core. Yeah, they have Giroux and Voracek, but the majority of their pieces surrounding those guys are either in the middle of their careers, they haven't hit 100% of their prime, or they're still young, like Provorov. Nolan Patrick's back, and he could occupy that second center slot, which does kind of scare me because Philly is not at a second line center for a while. So if they actually start figuring that part out, and they have a lot of good young D, Carter Hart's probably going to play really well. Brian Elliott's a good serviceable backup too. In the North Division, I do think Toronto's probably going to win that division, not with ease, but they will. I like Montreal only because I think Claude Julien will coach that team in a good way. They're young enough where they could steal some games. The only thing is goal scoring with that team. Will they be able to score enough goals, and what Carey Price are we going to get? Are we going to get kind of the playoff Carey Price, or are we going to get kind of the worn down Carey Price where he looks good the first couple of games, but then over time all those shots accumulate? They do have Jake Allen there, who is a good backup. Winnipeg, I guarantee they're in the mix. They probably will advance. Calgary, absolutely. Edmonton, of course. I'm not as high on the Canucks because they lost Markstrom. He did a lot for them last year, and he's in Calgary this year. So that'll be interesting to see him and Tanev go back to Vancouver a few times, 8 times this year. That'll be interesting. Central Division, we can write off essentially Florida, Chicago, unfortunately. Nashville's almost in that zone. They're right there. Tampa, Dallas, Columbus, to some extent, they'll obviously make it. And then in the West, the West outside of St. Louis, Vegas, and the Avs, it's almost a jump ball for that last spot. There's a lot of teams that could surprise you. San Jose may have a decent year. The Yotes, like Rigsby was saying, Minnesota could, depending on what happens. We'll see. Anaheim or LA, I don't think they got what it takes at the moment, but you never know. It's a 56-game season. You start stealing games left and right. Cup picks for me, I want to see Vegas. My heart tells me Colorado. So I think it'll be the conference final, probably, or depending on the seeding, one of those two teams in the cup. And I do think it'll be, I don't want to say Philly, but a lot is leaning towards Philly. But also, it couldn't shock me if it's Toronto. They have the goaltending, they have the defense, and they're deep. One of those teams is going to get a slot in the semis. And I do think
The Canadian teams.
the Canadian
Yeah.
team,
Yeah.
I do think, I want to say Edmonton too, but they don't have goaltending and their defense isn't as deep. Freddie Anderson's going to win a ton of games this year against that division. But also the Jets, if they stay healthy and they get the goal scoring they need, they have Connor Hellebuck, who's a damn good goalie too.
Yeah. I had a big question mark next to the Jets because I had them kind of out of that top 4 there, but they could easily be in, right?
Well, and I remember we talked about it a while ago. If the Jets don't get hurt in that first round series last year, they had Laine got hurt, Scheifele got hurt, Brian Little was out, who was also a key cog at that point. He retired, unfortunately. But, they had so many injuries. And then also their defense the whole year was decimated with Bufflin not playing and retiring and all the other nonsense. But
Yeah.
that's a team. Paul Maurice is a good coach. They know what they're doing. The trade situation around this year will be really interesting to see because I doubt any Canadian team makes a move with any American team. Just with the COVID restrictions and the quarantine, it's just not worth it. It's not really worth it. And then also, too, the other thing, you may see some trades in the division. You really may. I mean, just in terms of proximity and you're close and the COVID restrictions pretty much around you, that'll be interesting to see too. I think that's going to be it. We'll see what happens when the puck drops tomorrow. And especially Caps, Flyers, Pens, they all play each other in the first 8 games pretty much.
Yeah.
So I know Pittsburgh schedule's off the hand. They're going 2 against Philly, then they come back and they play 2 against Washington. So you don't start
Get the hate going.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
start that stretch very well. You're going to be in a world of hurt.
That East Division is going to be a bloodbath. It's just there's already rivalries inside of that division, and then you're gonna, like you said, I think Washington goes to Buffalo for the first 2 games, then they go to Pittsburgh for the next 2 games, then they have Buffalo come in town, and then I think they play the next 2 games against Pittsburgh after that at home.
Wow.
Or some craziness
Yeah.
like that. These guys are just going to be at each other from the first 2 weeks on. It's going to be awesome.
But I know the Penguins, especially, they don't start Octobers very well. I think one year in October, in somewhat recent history, they were 2-6-1. And then granted, they turn around in November, December when they got their legs, but you start 2-6-1 in a 56 game season.
Yeah.
And especially since all the teams you're playing get those points.
But think about those seasons too, those sort of normal starts in October or whatever. You're not playing the same team 4 times in 7 days. Right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So so they'll fly into Washington, they'll play a game, and it might be the national game on NBC or whatever. And there's a lot of hype and hoopla around it and a little bit of emotion. And then they fly to, Carolina or something like that, where the rivalry really isn't there and the emotions really aren't there. So they're just kind of in their routine. With this schedule, maybe even though Washington tends to start slow sometimes too, since they're starting the year and they're playing each other 4 times in 7 days, I think it makes up for any of that slow start stuff. I think that maybe teams that start slow, like a Pittsburgh or whoever, maybe it helps them get into the fight, get into the competition faster, because they're playing a playoff schedule, essentially. So that's what I think. Okay, so, John, last week we spent a lot of time talking about the New York Islanders and their cap situation and why Lou Lamoriello needs to fix that, why they need to or how they were going to sign Mathew Barzal, and then they signed Mathew Barzal. So I think we need to follow up on that. And since you're kind of like the resident, I don't know, NHL nerd
Nerd.
that understands the ins and outs of
I was
the
gonna say Rain
CBA.
Man.
I mean, you might as well be a player agent at this point, but so can you quickly
I wish.
follow up on how did they make that deal work and explain how they're going to move forward into the season, which starts tomorrow?
Okay, so I'll do this as high level as humanly possible because to dig down into some of the
No digging.
nonsense.
No digging.
Yeah, it'll be like 8 hours. It'll be worse than a Joe Rogan podcast. I like Joe Rogan's podcast, but
Explain
sometimes
it
they're
so I
just
can
too long.
understand it.
Too damn
please.
long.
They're just too damn long sometimes. All right, so flat cap this year, $81.5 million. As of last week when we spoke, Mathew Barzal was still without a contract. He did report to training camp, did his team physicals, probably his media photos, all that jazz. Wasn't able to step on the ice because he didn't have a current contract. A lot of that, I'm sure, had to do with the COVID world we now live in and what's going on with the New York Islanders cap situation. So $81.5 million flat cap, that is the max you can do. Your salary, in terms of your cap space, is calculated by your AAV, your average annual value of your contract. So someone could technically make $50 million a year on a $10 million deal, and they only get paid twice on a signing bonus, and their actual salary could be $300K. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but obviously $50 million, 10 years, it's a $5 million AAV contract. Okay. Very simple, cut and dry. That's how it's calculated into your cap space. Now, Mathew Barzal signed for $7 million. Okay. That's his AAV. 3-year deal. Going into that, it's $4 million this year, $7 million next year, and then $10 million the last year of his deal. Now, keep in mind, his actual paycheck per year doesn't matter in terms of AAV or the cap hit, however. So the Islanders were not cap compliant because it's this abbreviated schedule. Every team has to be cap compliant by noon tomorrow, the opening day for the 2021 NHL season. It's the way it is this year. A lot of teams are scrambling. That's why you see so many waiver moves. Johnny Boychuk is on long-term injury reserve. So he has a $6 million AAV cap hit for 2 years, this season and then next season. So because he's $6 million, they do it in a formula that is too complicated to get into, but I'm just going to say it's about $3 million, or I think actually at the moment it's calculated as like $6 million, however you want to do it, goes back onto the cap technically, and I'm using air quotes because it shows they're over. So because Mathew Barzal makes $7 million, his contract is $7 million. They're paying him $4 million this year. The other $3 million is there, and that's how you become cap compliant. The other thing the Islander, I keep mixing that up. Someone's going to screw me for that, I'm sure. The Islanders also put Uncle Leo Karmaroff on waivers with the hope of putting him either on the AHL or the taxi squad. Two things about that. If he's on the taxi squad, his $3 million cap hit does not count against the current cap. If he's in the AHL, he also doesn't have to pay escrow, which is another thing. So he'll actually get more money in his pocket.
Andrew Ladd was also put on waivers too with $5.5 million in AAV.
He was. So he has to clear. It's 24 hours on waiver without a team claiming you. And then once he clears, they can either assign him to the taxi squad or AHL full time. And the way the taxi squad is working this year, and I apologize if this is very dry, the taxi squad this year, it's 4 to 6 players that are not counted on your salary cap roster. They are essentially similar to the NFL where it's a practice squad. Those guys will travel with the team. They will skate with the team, do the team meetings, team lunches, all that jazz. They get the NHL per diem while they're there, but their cap hit when they move back and forth from the starting lineup does not count. So there will be a lot of players, I guarantee, this year. They'll have a game, let's say, on Wednesday, then they don't play till Friday. So on Thursday, it'll randomly show that this player is now on the taxi squad. And then Friday morning it'll come, they're moving it back. It's just for cap ramification purposes. It's just a paper move. There's nothing really against it. But yeah, so Lou had 2 really bad contracts he signed, Leo Karmaroff and Andrew Ladd, both old players, unfortunately. Good players, but they're old. And That essentially was Mathew Barzal's money. So they were saved by long-term injury reserve on this one.
That clears things up.
And that's the story of that.
Should I go into escrow very quick? Should I clarify that? I know I have some
Absolutely
questions.
not.
No.
Okay. I had some questions about that.
Absolutely
We'll go into it.
Yeah, I kind of glazed over.
The bottom line is they're compliant. Barzal's signed.
I think Cap Friendly tomorrow is going to say they have a little bit of room, like a couple million.
Yeah, especially with that lad deal, right? So they're
Yeah.
probably looking at another move or two,
It wouldn't surprise me.
right?
It could be that they're trying to grab a couple guys on the cheap to maybe get them through this season so that they can be both cap compliant and have enough guys on the roster to account for
Right.
injuries and that sort of stuff.
Right.
And also, too, Corey Perry was on waivers in Montreal. He's a starter, obviously. You would want him in your lineup. He's on the taxi squad, but I think that's more just to kind of save a little bit of cap space and then also have him back and forth from the taxi squad. He is a veteran, so will he play all the games? Unsure. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but that could be another paper move, like we were saying.
I think we should talk about a couple of lakes. There's 2 lakes I want to bring up.
Oh, yes, that's a good idea.
I want to bring up Lake Placid, where the NWHL is going to be playing the Isabel Cup.
It's Isobel.
Is
No,
it?
it's
No,
Isabel.
it's Isabel.
It's Isabel.
It's a woman's
We
name.
looked it up, John.
Isabel.
fucked,
All right,
John.
here's your history lesson. History lesson right here. Isabel was the name of Lord Stanley's daughter.
Lord Stanley was the Governor General of Canada. He's the one that commissioned and donated the Stanley Cup as the Challenge Cup for hockey in Canada / North America. His daughter, Isabel, is one of the first women hockey players in Canada, probably North America, because at that time, like, who was playing hockey? So it's named the Isabel Cup.
I've heard it on like TSN. It's always Isobel. So
Yeah,
is that a
because the
Canadian
Canadians,
thing?
no, because they
Okay,
also
then I
spell
won't say it like
favorite. They also spell favorite with a U.
Favorite.
And
Cooler.
cooler.
Check.
Cooler.
and we lose all the Canadian listeners.
No. We've already lost the Canadian
We
listeners.
just lost
Not
them.
only do they spell these words weird, they also lose at the World Junior Championships.
Oh. We also
We've
have
already
listeners,
lost them.
Aaron.
we also have listeners in the UK. Just saying.
Okay, so maybe the word spellings are all right, but the losing in the WGC.
But the losing in the World Junior Championships, yeah.
So yes, Lake Placid, Isabel. I'm gonna say Isabel. It's
You
it's her
can
name.
Just do
The Isabel Cup.
just do Isabel.
So that's happening. And then there's
That's
another
great.
lake. Yeah, that's exciting. It's gonna be on TV. Gonna get to watch some games. Here's my pick. I'm picking the Buttes. Let's go Buttes, Fort Butte. But then we also got Lake Tahoe. They're gonna play some games out at Lake Tahoe. That's gonna be awesome. I see the Kings and the Avalanche, and then the Flyers and the Bruins. That's exciting. Outdoor games on a lake. That's gonna be great.
Yeah, it should be sick. They're gonna
The
play
only-
like on the south shore of the lake. You're gonna have the mountains in the background with the snow and the lake in the background. By the rink and everything. It should be beautiful visuals on TV for one. And then they're going to continue the tradition of the outdoor games. Should be awesome, right?
Oh yeah.
The
So
only thing that
John's gonna poo poo now.
no,
Mhm.
I like the fact they're doing an outdoor game because I'm hoping it snows and you get a great visual, with the mountains and the lake in the background and whatnot. But they couldn't have. I like the fact the Avs are in it. That's a good marketable team. You got really good young talent: McKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog, Cale Makar. You couldn't get like some younger teams. I mean, I understand Philly. We can market them. They have young players that are up and coming. But Boston, they couldn't have chucked a few more. ideas in there to get young. I think especially this year, the NHL should make their goal clearly with the helmet advertising and the way they're doing everything. It's to print as much cash as humanly possible. So I don't mind Philly because they're a very marketable team. They're a big market team. Boston is as well, but I just think you could have got someone else in there.
Well, if
I
you're
don't know
printing
who.
if you're printing cash, wouldn't you pick Pittsburgh and Washington? That's like a
Yeah,
point
that's-
rivalry.
it's kind of been done. I don't know. I don't want to
Yeah,
say
but
it's been
so-
done to death.
Right, but if it's about cash,
Philly and
right?
Boston has too.
Philly and
This
Boston
should
right.
be
played.
Philly and the Leafs.
But they're not
if
a
you ask me.
rivalry.
The problem is that you can't
could
do
see-
it with the COVID restrictions
Right.
too. So that has to come into
Well,
play.
yeah, I understand that's
So-
part of it. I get it because the
If you-
Canadian border.
If
But
you ask me, this is a great opportunity to see the Leafs play. But
Yeah, it was
know,
gonna. So I
what are
think
you
it
gonna do?
goes. I think it goes back to how big it goes back to how big those team markets are. So Boston and Philly, large markets. You could have gone with the Rangers, but
you also want an exciting game.
right, would it have worked?
Sorry,
Like,
Rangers.
Right. I don't think they're there yet.
Well, they're a
Yeah.
wild card, right?
So
like,
Philly and Boston clearly are going to be competing for something in that division. So
Mhm.
yeah, like that makes sense. Although it sucks because in all the outdoor game, like in all the winter classics, right? It's always Chicago and somebody. It's been Pittsburgh and somebody. It's been Washington and somebody. It's been, well, actually, it's like Chicago, Washington, and Pittsburgh.
Boston's been in a, Boston.
Bo-
Boston's been at least one, right?
Boston's been in one
Yeah,
or two,
yeah.
maybe. Like
Yeah.
it's always the same teams in these outdoor games, which is what everybody's going to point at, right? So now it's Boston and Philly again. Colorado had that thing with LA a couple seasons ago
at the Air
right?
Force Academy, which is pretty
Right,
cool.
which was awesome.
Mhm.
And I 100% agree. Like Colorado should be in it
Yep.
because I love.
And I agree with
McKinnon.
Vegas too. Like the two teams they're close to Lake Tahoe for one. So
Yeah,
There's that.
right. And the proximity, especially on the West Coast, Vegas, Colorado. Yeah, that makes sense. In Lake Tahoe, that was probably the natural matchup for the West in Lake Tahoe. But who cares? Nobody's attending the game.
right.
But see, I think that's where the NHL is going to sell it because it's on Lake Tahoe and that great visual. You could sell it. You could sell
watch
the
it
TV
on your
aspect.
TV. Yeah,
Yeah, you could sell it on the TV aspect versus a game where, I went to the one at Nats Park when they played Chicago. That was great. When I watch it on TV, I always watch the Winter Classics because I'm a hockey fan. But to
Yeah.
attract that casual hockey fan, that it's almost the next step for the Winter Classic. You need stunning visuals. You need something that's very, very appealing and not everyday cookie cutter.
So,
So
there
then
were
you-
rumors. There were rumors originally that they were going to go to Lake Louise up in Alberta, which I don't know if you've ever seen pictures up there. Like that's on my bucket list to go up there,
It's
At some
gorgeous.
point.
Yeah.
I was
like-
just gonna say that.
right? Like
I was gonna say
so-
if they really wanted to sell it, they would do one in Canada as well on an
Yeah.
actual lake.
Yeah, and that was
Actually,
there were
That would be
rumors.
amazing.
There were rumors, towards the end of last calendar year that they were going to go to Lake Louise and try to do something up there. But I think maybe again, with the COVID restrictions and the quarantining and everything that's required to go over the border, maybe it just wasn't going to work out. So then they picked the next best thing, which was like, let's find a lake out west. Oh, Lake Tahoe, stunning visuals, mountains, snow,
Yeah. Name a lake
the
out
whole
west.
thing. Right. I know. Exactly.
There's two.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Salt
like-
Lake, no
yeah.
hockey there.
Yeah,
In Tahoe, yeah.
Yeah. Right. Like, and it's going to be a winter landscape
Mhm.
Right.
in Lake Tahoe at that time of year. So, yeah, man, I'm on board. I think it's going to be awesome.
Yeah,
I
it's
think it
gonna be
will
great.
too.
2 games too that we get to see out there. That'll be sweet. in the same. I think it's the same weekend, right? So
that was the only thing that's kind of weird because normally they do team practice like the day before, and then they do like a family and friends get together, and then next team comes on. So I'm curious how that side will work because the way the games are staggered, and then are the teams going to be able to do the family and friends thing? Because that's really kind of what's it about this year. Obviously, it's different because it's going to. Depending on how the travel arrangements are going to be.
I was going to say, we got COVID.
Happens.
You got COVID stuff. So
correct.
We got the COVID.
So
we'll kind of see. But good visuals for the NHL, and I hope they kind of use this as a blueprint. Like I wouldn't be upset if they go back to Lake Tahoe multiple times, just because the visuals seem, at least from what we got from some of the renderings and the hopeful idea of it, it's going to look, like I said, the best that we've ever seen thus far.
It's going to be beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be awesome.
Exactly.
All right, guys, that's our show for tonight. Thank you for listening. Remember to tell your friends, tell your teammates, and also make sure to join our Discord channel. Go to beersandalot.com/Discord, and see you next week.